All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling the history of Nepal
Okay.
and focusing on this figure who seems to be everywhere in the research you gave me, Prithvi Narayan Shah.
Yeah.
Um, we have this YouTube transcript you sent over titled Prithvi Jayanti and National Unity Day
Right.
from the channel Shankar Man Singh.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, but I'm particularly curious
Yeah.
about like how one person managed to unify a whole nation.
Well, it is a fascinating story,
Yeah.
especially when you think about the context.
Right.
So Prithvi Narayan Shah was born way back in 1723.
Okay.
He inherited the kingdom of Gorkha,
Mm-hmm.
which was just one among many in very fragmented Nepal.
Right.
But he had this vision, this idea of a unified nation. And incredibly, over 33 years,
Okay.
he led campaigns that brought together these 22 and 24 smaller states.
33 years, that's longer than some modern nations have even existed.
I know, right?
Like it makes you wonder what drove him, you know?
Yeah.
Is it just ambition or was there something more to it?
Well, the transcript really highlights his anxieties about the rising power of the British in South Asia.
Right, right.
He saw what was happening in India,
Mm-hmm.
how the British East India Company was expanding its influence,
Yeah.
and he believed that a divided Nepal would be easy prey for these colonial powers.
So it sounds like he wasn't just driven by like a thirst for power or territory,
Right.
but by a genuine desire to protect his people from what he saw as a threat.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you pointed out that part about the Sugali Treaty
Yeah.
in the transcript.
Mm-hmm.
This happened decades after Prithvi Narayan Shah died.
Uh.
But it's crucial because it resulted in Nepal losing significant territory to British India.
Right.
And this loss is still a sensitive issue in Nepal
Oh, wow.
and shapes its relationship with India even today.
So you're saying his fears were realized?
Yeah,
Even though he wasn't around to see it?
sadly.
It's a reminder that even successful leaders can't always predict the future.
That's very true.
But I'm curious at like how did he actually do it?
Yeah.
How did he manage to unite all those kingdoms?
Well, it was a combination of military strategy,
Okay.
diplomacy,
Mm-hmm.
and really a shrewd understanding of the political landscape.
Right, right.
The source we have doesn't go into a ton of detail about his tactics,
Okay.
but it does mention that he wasn't afraid to use force when he deemed it necessary.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Unification is rarely a peaceful process.
Right.
But, you know, the source also mentions this Divya Upadesh.
Yes.
Or divine counsel, I think it translates to,
Mhm.
which suggests he was thinking beyond just, you know, military might.
Exactly.
So what can you tell us about that?
Well, it's a fascinating document.
Okay.
Really outlines his principles of governance and diplomacy and national unity.
I mean, you mentioned in my notes that I was particularly interested in his Divya Upadesh.
Oh, right. Yes.
So maybe we could dive into some of those principles.
Yeah, absolutely. One that really stands out is his focus on maintaining a strong military,
Okay.
and not just for defense, but also for internal stability.
So he was thinking long term,
Absolutely.
not just about the immediate battles.
Yeah, he believed that a weak military could invite chaos
Right.
and foreign intervention.
Which is a relevant perspective even today.
Very much so.
Yeah. So it seems like there was a lot more depth to his thinking
Yeah.
than just being, you know, a conqueror.
Absolutely. And, one of the most striking aspects of his philosophy is his emphasis on self-reliance. The transcript mentions how he really encouraged local production and discouraged dependence on foreign goods.
Wow.
So he seemed to understand that true independence required economic sovereignty.
So it's like he was advocating for a kind of economic nationalism
Right.
centuries before it became a buzzword.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder how much his ideas still influence Nepal's economic policies today.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like his legacy isn't just about historical events,
Right.
but also about ideas
Yeah,
that continue to shape Nepal's approach to economic challenges.
definitely.
Seems like we're just scratching the surface of his impact here.
We are. His story is a reminder that history isn't just dates and battles. It's
Right.
about ideas that shape societies
Yeah.
and continue to influence the present.
And speaking of influence, the source also mentions the controversies surrounding his legacy. You know, he's celebrated as the father of the nation by some,
Right.
but criticized by others for his for his methods.
Well, you mentioned some controversies surrounding the monarchy.
Right.
What specifically were the criticisms leveled against him?
That's a great question and something we should definitely explore further.
Yeah.
It seems like his legacy is far from straightforward. But before we get into that, maybe let's take a closer look at his life and times.
Right, yeah.
Like, what kind of person was Prithvi Narayan Shah?
Well, the source does offer some interesting glimpses into his personality.
Okay.
One detail that caught my attention was the mention of him spending his final days on a ferry.
A ferry. That's kind of unexpected for a king.
I know, right?
Especially one known for, his military conquests.
Right.
What was he doing on a ferry?
Well, apparently he was seriously ill.
Okay.
And spend 9 days on this ferry before passing away.
Wow.
But what's really interesting is that he didn't just rest during this time. He actually used those days to lecture on various topics related to Nepal's future.
So even on his deathbed, he was thinking about his nation's well-being.
It seems so.
Sorry.
It really speaks to his dedication to his vision.
Yeah.
The transcript specifically mentions him talking about, Nepal's geopolitical situation.
Right, which makes sense given his anxieties about protecting the nation from external threats.
Yeah, and he also talked about social life, defense.
Okay.
And importantly, development.
So it sounds like he was really trying to impart his wisdom and vision for Nepal, even as his own time was running out.
It's really quite remarkable.
Yeah, it paints a picture of a leader who was deeply invested in his nation's future, even in his final moments. Let's connect that back to the controversies surrounding his legacy.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that there were criticisms leveled against him.
Right.
What were those about?
Well, some of the criticisms stem from the methods he used to achieve unification.
Right.
Remember, this was the 18th century.
Yeah.
Warfare wasn't exactly known for its sensitivity.
Right. Good point.
There are accounts of battles and sieges that resulted in significant casualties.
Easy to romanticize the past.
Yep.
But we have to remember that nation building often comes at a cost.
Absolutely.
Were there any specific criticisms about his leadership style?
Well, there were whispers about his ruthlessness, a willingness to do whatever it took to achieve his goals.
It makes me think about his famous quote, "Nepal is like a yam between two stones."
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's such a vivid image, that perfectly captures Nepal's position between, India and China.
Yeah.
Those powerful neighbors. And he had to navigate those relationships very carefully, right?
Absolutely. The transcript mentions how even after unification, Nepal faced, significant challenges from its neighbors.
Right.
The Sugali Treaty in 1816 resulted in the loss of Nepali territory to British India.
Right.
And this is a grievance that still resonates today.
So it sounds like his vision of a unified Nepal wasn't just about physical boundaries, but also about maintaining a distinct cultural and political identity.
Exactly.
In the face of, those external pressures. And that balancing act seems just as relevant today.
Absolutely.
As it was back then.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned earlier that that some people saw him as a symbol of oppression.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, some critics argue that his focus on unification led to the suppression of local identities and cultures.
So they're saying he imposed a dominant narrative of Nepali identity.
Right, which may have marginalized certain groups.
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
It's something we see in a lot of nation-building narratives.
Yeah.
The drive for unity can sometimes come at the expense of diversity.
It's true.
Do these criticisms also extend to his economic policies?
Right. Yeah. So some argue that his economic policies were too inward-looking. Okay. That they actually hindered Nepal's economic development by limiting trade and engagement with the outside world.
So there are different perspectives on his economic legacy as well.
Very much so.
It seems like his story is full of these complexities and contradictions,
It is.
which makes him all the more fascinating to study.
Absolutely. And it's important to acknowledge these different perspectives.
Yeah.
Even if they clash, it helps us understand the complexities of history
Yeah.
and the lasting impact of figures like Prithvi Narayan Shah.
It also reminds us that there's rarely a single definitive answer.
Right.
When it comes to interpreting the past. His legacy is a bit of a puzzle with different pieces fitting together in different ways depending on who's putting it together.
Exactly.
But before we wrap up this discussion, I'd love to delve a little deeper into his Divya Upadesh.
Yeah, let's do it.
Seems like a treasure trove of insights into his thinking.
It really is.
What else can you tell us about it?
Well, one of the most striking aspects of the Divya Upadesh is its focus on practical advice for rulers.
Okay.
He wasn't just interested in abstract philosophy.
So it was like a handbook for effective leadership.
Exactly.
Based on his own experiences.
Yeah. What were some of the key principles he emphasized?
One that stands out is his emphasis on knowing your enemy and yourself.
Right.
He believed that a ruler must understand the strength and weaknesses of both his own nation and his adversaries.
Yeah, to make sound decisions.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It seems like strategic thinking was a key part of his approach to leadership.
Absolutely. What else?
What else did he emphasize?
He also stressed the importance of maintaining a strong and loyal army.
Okay.
But he cautioned against relying solely on military force.
Oh, interesting.
He believed that diplomacy and alliances were equally important tools.
So it suggests a more nuanced approach to power than just brute force.
Yeah.
It's like he understood that true leadership requires a balance of different skills and strategies. And he wasn't just concerned with external threats.
Right.
He also emphasized the importance of internal unity.
Yes.
And stability. He believed that a divided nation was vulnerable to both internal strife and foreign intervention.
Absolutely.
That's an interesting point considering the historical context. He had just spent decades unifying a fragmented Nepal.
Right.
So it makes sense that he would be concerned about maintaining that unity.
Exactly. And he had some interesting ideas about how to achieve that unity.
Oh.
For example, he believed in promoting a sense of shared national identity.
Okay.
Even while respecting the diversity of cultures within Nepal.
This seems like a delicate balancing act.
It is.
How did he propose to achieve that?
He believed that a shared language, a common history, and a sense of collective purpose were essential for forging that national unity.
So it wasn't about imposing a single monolithic culture on everyone.
No, he seemed to understand that true unity comes from embracing diversity.
Right, not erasing it.
Exactly.
That's a valuable lesson for any leader.
It is.
Regardless of the time or place.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, did he have any specific advice for dealing with, India and China, those powerful neighbors?
He did. He had a lot to say about that.
Okay.
He believed that Nepal must maintain a careful balance between those two giants, avoiding becoming too dependent on either one.
That sounds like a challenging tightrope walk.
It is.
How did he think Nepal could manage that?
He advocated for a policy of non-alignment.
Okay.
Playing one power against the other while safeguarding Nepal's independence.
That's incredibly insightful. It's like he anticipated this concept of non-alignment.
Right.
That became popular in the 20th century.
Yeah.
He was definitely ahead of his time.
Yeah, he was.
In many ways. And his insights on geopolitics are just as relevant today.
Absolutely.
As they were back then.
Yeah.
It seems like we could spend hours discussing his Divya Upadesh.
We really could.
But I'm conscious of our time. Before we wrap up this deep dive, I'd like to get your final thoughts on Prithvi Narayan Shah's legacy.
Okay.
What's the key takeaway here for our listener?
Well, Prithvi Narayan Shah was a complex and controversial figure.
Yeah.
But there's no denying his impact on Nepal. He was a visionary leader who unified a fragmented nation and laid the foundation for its independence. His ideas on self-reliance and national unity and strategic thinking continue to resonate today, offering valuable lessons for leaders and citizens alike.
That's a great summary. And I think it's important to remember that his story isn't just a historical curiosity.
Right.
It's a reminder that the choices made by leaders,
Yeah.
even centuries ago, can have a profound and lasting impact
Yeah.
on the course of a nation.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that history isn't just a collection of dates and names.
Yeah.
It's a living narrative
Yeah.
that continues to shape the present and influence the future.
So as we conclude this deep dive into the life and legacy of Prithvi Narayan Shah, I'm left with a thought-provoking question for our listener.
Okay.
Prithvi Narayan Shah's vision for Nepal was born out of a desire to resist foreign domination and build a self-reliant nation.
Yeah.
How do you think his vision aligns with Nepal's current geopolitical realities, and what lessons can be learned from his approach to nation building as Nepal navigates the 21st century?
It's a question worth pondering, and I encourage our listener to explore further, to delve into the rich history of Nepal and the complexities of Prithvi Narayan Shah's legacy.
Yeah.
There are countless stories waiting to be uncovered and insights to be gained from this remarkable journey through time.
And with that, we wrap up our deep dive.
Okay.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those thought-provoking questions.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about Prithvi Narayan Shah's military campaigns, the controversies, his Divya Upadesh. But one thing we haven't really touched on is his personal life.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of man was he beyond the battlefield?
Well, the sources we have offer some interesting glimpses into his personality.
Okay.
One detail that stood out to me
Yeah.
was his emphasis on leading by example.
Oh, interesting.
He wasn't the kind of king who just sat back in his palace and issued orders. He actively participated in campaigns, often leading his troops from the front.
So that's kind of a contrast to the image of a ruthless conqueror.
It is, yeah.
It suggests a certain level of courage, a willingness to share in the risks with his soldiers.
Absolutely.
And there are also accounts of him living a relatively simple life.
Yeah.
Even after becoming the ruler of a unified Nepal.
Right. He didn't indulge in excessive luxury or anything like that.
It makes me think about his focus on self-reliance and economic independence.
Right.
You know, it wasn't just an abstract concept for him. It was a way of life.
Yeah, and this commitment to simplicity and frugality is reflected in some of his economic policies.
Oh.
He believed in promoting local industries, encouraging agriculture, discouraging unnecessary imports.
So he really wanted Nepal to be self-sufficient.
Exactly.
Less reliant on foreign goods.
Absolutely. He understood that true independence went beyond just political sovereignty.
Right.
It also required economic strength and a sense of self-reliance.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
How ideas from centuries ago can still be so relevant today.
It's true.
I'm curious. Did he have any hobbies or interests outside of politics and warfare?
Well, the source material doesn't go into a ton of detail about his personal life.
Okay.
But there are mentions of him being a skilled horseman and a keen observer of nature.
It's interesting to imagine this powerful ruler who was also attuned to the natural world.
Yeah, it adds another dimension to his character.
It does, and it reminds us that even these historical figures who seem larger than life were still human beings with their own individual interests and passions.
Absolutely.
Now, let's bring it back to the big picture here. What's the enduring legacy of Prithvi Narayan Shah?
Well, his legacy is multifaceted.
Okay.
And it continues to be debated in Nepal today. He's revered by many as the father of the nation.
Right.
The visionary leader who unified a fragmented country and laid the foundation for its independence.
But also criticized by some?
Yeah, for his more authoritarian tendencies and the use of force in achieving his goals.
It's a classic example of history rarely being black and white.
Exactly.
There are always shades of gray, and the interpretation of historical figures often depends on one's perspective.
It's true.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life and legacy of Prithvi Narayan Shah, what's the key takeaway for our listener?
I think the key takeaway is that Prithvi Narayan Shah was a product of his time, a complex and ambitious ruler who left an undeniable mark on Nepal. His vision of a unified and independent nation continues to shape Nepal's identity.
Yeah.
Even as his methods and motives are subject to scrutiny and debate.
His story reminds us that history isn't just about the past.
Yeah.
It's a living narrative that shapes the present and influences the future.
Absolutely.
And understanding figures like Prithvi Narayan Shah helps us to grasp the complexities of nation building, the legacies of colonialism, and the ongoing struggles for sovereignty and identity that many nations face today.
It's true.
So as we conclude this deep dive into the life and legacy of Prithvi Narayan Shah, I'm left with a thought-provoking question for our listener.
Okay.
Prithvi Narayan Shah's vision for Nepal was born out of this desire to resist foreign domination and build a self-reliant nation. How do you think his vision aligns with Nepal's current geopolitical realities?
Yeah.
And what lessons can be learned from his approach to nation building as Nepal navigates the 21st century?
It's a question worth pondering. And for those of you who want to explore further, we encourage you to delve into the rich history of Nepal and the fascinating life of Prithvi Narayan Shah. There are countless stories waiting to be uncovered.
Right, yeah.
And insights to be gained from this remarkable journey through time.
Absolutely.
Next time,
yeah,
keep exploring, keep learning,
and
keep asking those thought-provoking questions.
And that is a wrap on another deep dive.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us.